How long have you guys been here?
Well, Dad had the Perkins Engineering business at Moorabbin Airport for a long time, I think from about 1993, and then he sold the business to Kelly Racing, Todd and Rick Kelly, around about 2012. And then we decided that we didn't need to be over in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, so we moved over to the west, sort of 2012, 2013. And yeah, we've got a pretty big shed here where we sort of ended up storing a bit too much gear, and we accumulate our family's gear as well. But no, you've always got to have a decent workshop, and we've got everything sort of we need here to do what we're doing, which from my point of view is restoring race cars, remanufacturing car parts, and kind of looking after some old Perkins Engineering customers. And then Dad's busy restoring Volkswagens, Land Rovers, Caterpillar tractors, and whatever he can find, and that's sort of at the back half of the workshop. So no, we keep busy. It's not every day that I'm going to be able to come to work and hang out with my old man either, so it's kind of cool in that sense, but just being able to make a business out of what we're doing is pretty neat as well.
Yeah. Jack, I've just spotted something super cool. Now, these have gone up in value a little bit the last few years, haven't they? This is the real McCoy, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is sort of an engine out of a VY Commodore from when they went from carburettor to the PFI engine. So it's what they call a twin throttle body, something you see in a Batmobile or a VN Group A. And this particular engine was actually originally a Tom Walkinshaw racing built engine. And then when Perkins Engineering was commissioned to run Holden Racing Team, we converted it from a TWR engine to a Perkins engine, so it got a PE number, PE 068, and it was actually originally on Zytec management, and then it switched to Motec. And then, long story short, it ended up going back to TWR, and they put it back to their specs. And then some years ago, I tracked it down and got it back, and it was designated for a project that's possibly not going to happen now. So I ended up finishing it as a full Perkins spec from sort of 88, 89, 90 as a twin throttle. It's got new JE pistons in it, some new rods and bits and pieces, and it's set to jet, ready to go on the dyno.
Awesome.
But yeah, they are getting quite rare these days. You know, the 93 engine in the 93 car is the same engine, but with the Perkins slide manifold in the top, so it uses 8 individual throttle bodies, but the sort of the block and the heads are basically the same part.
Does it still have the side intake?
Yeah. So the side air intake couples out the front, and the pickup comes in from behind the headlight. So the forced air comes in from the poor gaps around the headlight. It's just got a big filter that sits up the front, and you know, this is still running a trusty Ryco Z30 on the front there, and yeah, we're going to dyno this, and it's for sale. So unless we find another project for it, I don't have any use for it. Or I could try and find a buggy or something to put it in, but
I can't imagine you'd have too much trouble selling that.
No, it should be pretty good. I kind of like to make sure that period correct things end up in period correct cars or projects. So clearly this engine came out of a particular car and a particular era. So I want to make sure that, you know, if someone desperately needs it for the right purpose, so it makes it doesn't end up in a boat or something.
I remember the yellow and blue VL
you
guys had.
Yeah, that was chassis 10. That was down at Phillip Island when we ran these cars just recently, and it's got the slide manifold in it, and that won the 92 Sandown 500. That's currently in those Bob Jane Team Arts liveries. It's been restored.
Still looks the same?
Yeah, it's been restored immaculately by a customer of ours. We did some work on it, but we didn't complete the restoration. But yeah, very cool cars, those VLs. They look grouse.
Speaking of history, this was Larry's last ride, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I forget when Dad started at Bathurst, so I'm going to say about 1976, and then he raced every year at Bathurst until 2003. And this was his last ever Bathurst race car, which was the only car that he ever hung on to as a race car. When he sold the business to Kelly's, this was part of the deal to stay with Dad, and we decided that we would restore it back to Castrol colours. So he was a co-driver that year with Stephen Richards, who was the sort of strike bowler for the team. And it was a pretty big restoration on this one as well, because again, it was a period of evolution for the category. This is the first year they copped the Ford front suspension, so it's got the double wishbone front suspension, and it got a Holden Motorsport engine. So restoring this one was another painful process. Some of this unique bar work got removed, and I had to put it back in. And this bar work, to change engines, you need to drop the cross member and kind of pull the engine out the bottom. And then we did away with that in 2005 and changed a few things and made bigger air boxes, but again, I had to go back in time. So this is a Holden Motorsport engine. This is the engine that was in the car, Bathurst, 2003. They finished 4th place, which would have been cool to be one spot better or a couple spots better in Dad's last race. But, you know, this was quite fun, and we wanted to have a car where we can do some driving. So Dad's driven this a couple of times now. I got to drive it, and you know, it's just bulletproof. It runs, it starts, it doesn't leak oil or anything, and you know, we just enjoyed sort of finishing this car off. And my dream one day would be to take a couple of these cars maybe over to Goodwood or something like that in the UK to run them. It's finished now, and like I said, it runs and goes and whatnot. So it's done nearly 500 Ks now since I restored it. So we'll chuck a few new filters and oils and bits and pieces through this one and just do some general service work and be ready to hit the track again.
And this one here is actually one of your cars, yeah?
Yeah, this one, I never thought I'd be a race car owner, but it was interesting. I won a race with James Courtney in 2015 on the Gold Coast, my first ever supercars race win, and I often thought it'd be a pretty cool thing to own that car because, you know, Dad never owned any of his cars, and I always thought if I get ahead of the time I could do that. And you know, I tried for years to buy it off him, and it was always a bit expensive, and I got it to a stage where someone helped me buy it and got it at the right sort of price, and it still needed a resto. We put an engine we sourced off HRT and finished off all the sign writing and a few bits and pieces, and we ran it for the first time at Phillip Island this year in 2022. And Dad got to drive this as well, which for me is pretty cool. He got to drive a race winner of mine. So yeah, it's a lot more technical and a lot more advanced than any of the other cars here, but still really cool. And you know, we spoke about the reds on those cars. This is a nice Corvette red, and then you put it next to this fluoro and you think, crikey, this looks great. So yeah, so we again just do a little bit of service work, some preparation work on this one, and find an event for this to go to. But yeah, these cars, it's funny, they still maintain like the factory doors and stuff, but you come over here and this is where these cars got shortened against a road car to keep the wheelbase the same. So you can see where they cut them out of the things here to shorten them. And then this is a composite skin. They're not the road car doors. So road car door handles, but they start to move away, you know, composite rear quarters, whereas this is a steel quarter panel on this car. But still, this one uses the Ford 9-inch, basically identical to the 93, 94 car, but the one behind you has independent rear end with a transaxle in the back, so hell of a lot more. Different. Yeah, it's actually, they're a bit of a nightmare to work on, to be honest with you. I prefer the old clunkers. They're pretty straightforward, and you know, that one's got the fuel cell sits in front of the back axle, whereas this car still has a fuel tank like the 93 car, kind of in the back, in the sort of factory position. Again, a couple of trusty Rycos in there, oil tank here, and same sort of layout. I mean, it looks a little different to the 93 car, but we still run 2 high pressure pumps, 2 Holly Blues, and 2 fuel filters. You know, keep it simple, stupid was kind of the philosophy of Perkins Engineering, and this is 10 years later than that car, and
it works.
Yeah, we never had to reinvent the wheel, which was handy. So this car, runs really well, and just it's been good fun just going to the track with Dad and having a fang without any pressure, you know. And you know, we put this one together, and it just runs beautifully. So like I said, we've got to pick another event now and go for another fang.
So growing up around Perkins Engineering, have you ever thought about doing a non-motorsport for a job?
Well, I did for a while. I was actually a sign writer for a few years up in Queensland, but you know, I grew up, you know, doing this sort of stuff with Dad and the various people that work for him, and you know, I enjoy it. I'm very proud of what his business set up to do. And now, you know, back then the team was it was a race team, but an engineering business that kind of built cars for customers, and you know, that was a big part of it. But now we're sort of restoring cars and remaking parts. We're not going car racing as such, and you know, we're pretty tooled up here. As you can see, we've got a little fabrication shop, and we've got our got a manual mill and a CNC lathe. So this is where we kind of make everything. And you know, this is actually some stuff we've been making for a customer. So radiator header tanks. So got some beautiful aluminium welding, and our swirl pots for the engines as well. So all this stuff we make in-house. So it's not just Perkins customers. There's a lot of other kind of general customers as well. But we've got 3,500 drawings for parts from when they started in '86 building the VK Commodores right through to the 2003 car, where they're all CAD drawings, and I've got all those drawings. Some of the hand sketches, they're just pieces of art when you look at them. You know, I'd love to frame a few up and put them around the walls because they're kind of cool. So for me, it's, you know, when Dad sold the team, it was an end of an era, but then all these customers said, oh, what do we do with our Perkins car or our Perkins engine? So I've started integrating with the customer network and building up something now that's turned into a full-time job. You know, I came back from being a sign rider to help Dad retire, and sort of 6-7 years on, I'm still here doing stuff. So it's kind of neat. And like I said, we've got sort of everything we need to sort of make and do stuff.
And so you don't have to outsource too much stuff?
I do get a little bit of CNC machining outsourced because, you know, in the old manual mill and that, it takes a while. But if we do a run of parts, we try and put together as many as we can. And then the more we get, the cheaper we can make it, and then we can give it to a machining business who can spit it out quicker. So if it's for our 2 VPs, we're actually helping a customer restore 2 cars in Central Coast of New South Wales. I've got cars running around in WA, New South Wales, Queensland. So whenever they're running into shit and breaking stuff and whatnot, they ring us looking for bits. So yeah, we do outsource a little bit, but all the fabrication and everything's done in-house. So,
I think going forward with a new era of, let's say, electrification, I think there's going to be a lot more old race cars getting around. Yeah,
it's funny because you know, we were talking about this off air, but I've got a little daughter who's 2 years old, and you said you've got a son who's 4, and when that comes around to getting their driver's license, they're not going to be able to get a manual car, and I think that's the first problem before electrification. So I worry a little bit about the future of motorsport from a driving point of view, but I think the history and all the old stuff is going to be something we will never get rid of, especially in Australia. And you know, in 20 years' time, when road cars aren't loud and proud, the kids will be like, "What are these things? They're pretty cool." So
even now, the historic racing, like you mentioned at Phillip Island, it's very popular.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's because you've got a generation of people, whether they're 50, 60-year-olds that grew up admiring Brock and Moffat and Johnson and Dad and whatever. Now they're retired or their business has been successful, they can afford to buy these toys, and then they take them to the track. And that will happen, you know. Like I dreamt as a kid of owning an SSU. I've never been able to do it, but one day I'll go and buy one, but they're a lot dearer than they used to be. And I think that's a generational thing, you know, and I think the next generation will be people that grew up you know, with VY Commodores and stuff like that, and now they want to go and buy them, and they think, hang on, I could actually buy a race car too, if they've been successful in business or whatever. And you know, I think it's going to be interesting, but I think you're right, the historic side of things is going to be...
People love the stuff they grew up with.
Yeah, and a lot of it, when you grow up as a kid and you dream of something and you always think it's too expensive, and then when you get later in life, whether you've worked out it's not that dear or you've made a bit of money or whatever, it becomes more achievable and you can kind of realise your dreams a bit. So that's, I guess, in some respects where we're at with the 93 car with Dad, you know. Could never afford to hang on to it at the time. You had to sell it to pay for the next one. And now that we're in a position where we claimed it back and we're doing it through the business, you know, it's obviously really, really cool, and it'd be a cool moment for Dad and for our family to have that thing back on track.
Thanks for showing us around Perkins Engineering, Jack. It's taken me back to my childhood looking at some of these cars.
Mate, you're welcome, and it's good to be able to show you around, and hopefully the viewers enjoy it.
Yeah, well, until next time, and the next episode of Ryco Workshop Heroes, for all your servicing needs, check out rycofilters.com.au.